Okay, you're all set.
All right, great. Well, thank you again for being here this afternoon. My name is Leslie Tucci, and I'm a dietetic intern at Kaiser University, and I'll be talking to you about food and mood. So to get started, I want to do a little exercise, and if you can, I'd like if you write your answers in the chat box. So I'd like to know, when you see this chocolate, if you associate any physical or emotional feelings with it. You can just write in the chat box just a word or whatever. How about coffee? Same thing. What do you feel when you think about coffee, or when you think about drinking coffee and how you feel? Next, we've got some spicy foods. So that's some spicy curry powder on the left. You've got some chilies and wasabi, which I think it's a spicy food. It seems spicy to me. How about fried chicken? Any thoughts or feelings with fried chicken? And finally, potato chips. These looks like some regular crinkled salty potato chips. All right, so let's get going. So you've probably felt a certain way after eating food. Maybe you have felt totally alert and wired after drinking coffee, or unable to stay awake after a big meal, or maybe certain foods have brought you comfort. You might have experienced this the other way around as well. You might have found that your mood affected what or how much you eat. You might have found yourself eating without even wanting to during a stressful period, or frantically scarfing down anything you could get your hands on during a bout of hunger. So none of these are coincidences. Our brain runs on fuel, also known as food. And not only does food give us energy, but it also provides micronutrients, so vitamins and minerals that support brain function, transportation of oxygen, building of hormones, and regulation of blood sugar. While food isn't medicine, we can't say something like, take 3 strawberries with a glass of water to help with whatever health problem. Too much or too little of certain nutrients over time, or even skipping meals, can affect our feelings. So in this workshop, I'd like to go over the following topics: how our mood affects our food choices. This will cover emotional or stress eating. I use these interchangeably, and includes what it is and what it isn't, how to deal with it, and why we find certain foods comforting. We'll also talk about hunger, anxiety, and their relationship to blood sugar, how it can result in frantic eating, what foods to choose when we feel like this, and how to support stable blood sugar. We'll also go over how our food choices can affect how we feel. So we'll talk about food and anxiety, sleep, memory, happiness, and relaxation. And finally, I'd like to discuss the timing of eating in order to feel our best, and then put it all together and discuss how a balanced, adequate, varied diet helps us feel our best. So I doubt I'm the only person here who has experienced the 10 a.m. hunger shakes. You might know what I'm talking about. You had a breakfast, you're doing fine, and then 10 a.m. comes around and you just need to eat. You feel hungry and shaky and weak and sweaty. How many of you can relate to the kinds of commercials that I have on the computer right now? You know, the ones where one of the people is angry and rude and miserable and completely transforms after having a snack. We call this hanger or being hangry. It's a clever combination of hungry and angry or anger. I was so happy when we talked about this in my coursework because it happens to so many people and it's definitely a real thing. So what is it? Hunger, or that frantic, shaky, urgent need to eat something, is related to a drop in blood sugar. So when we eat, our food is broken down into simple particles. Carbohydrates break down to glucose, a sugar, and the simplest of carbohydrates. Glucose is the main source of energy for our body. It enters our bloodstream, and when it does, our pancreas releases a hormone called insulin, which allows our cells to use the glucose for energy. If we haven't eaten for a while, or if we haven't eaten enough, or if our body used up its energy too quickly, the level of glucose in our blood drops. This drop triggers the release of hormones such as cortisol, a stress hormone, and adrenaline, our fight or flight hormone. This can lead us to feel hangry, moody, stressed, and anxious. And I just want to show here on the graphic, you can see as you eat some food, the red is your blood sugar and it goes up. The insulin goes up as well. And as the insulin takes the glucose out of your blood and delivers it to your cells, your blood glucose goes down. And if it goes down steeply, like in this picture, it's an energy crash. And that's where we start to feel hunger and anxiety and bad feelings. So how can we avoid a drop in blood sugar that can lead to stressful hunger? First, we can choose foods or create meals that will not result in a blood sugar spike. When we eat simple carbohydrates such as sweetened fruit juices, sodas, baked goods, cookies, even some breakfast cereals, a large amount of glucose enters our blood quickly, resulting in a spike like what you see on this graphic here, and is used quickly as well, leading to a drop below normal levels. And even though fruit is nutritious and full of fiber, some people may even feel this when they have fruit by itself. Instead, when we consume fiber-rich carbohydrates like berries, avocados, oatmeal, popcorn, or beans, for example, or pair a simple carbohydrate food with some protein or fat, like nuts or low-fat cheese, this results in a slow and steady rise in blood sugar that tapers off more slowly, helping us avoid that drop that results in the shaky, hungry feeling. So if you see here on this graphic, when you eat foods combined like this, your blood glucose doesn't rise as high, and then it tapers off more slowly as the carbohydrates are released into your bloodstream more slowly and your body has more energy over time. I also want to talk about emotional and stress eating. So emotional or stress eating is a bit of a hot topic that's widely experienced but often misunderstood. So I'd like to talk about what it is and what it isn't. Certain foods can make us feel good or provide us with comfort or familiarity. This can be due to the nutrients the food contains. We'll talk about this more later on. Or it can be because it's a favorite food from childhood, and its taste and smell is associated with happy memories. Emotional eating happens when we use foods that provide us comfort, whether consciously or not, to self-soothe, to suppress negative emotions, to deal with stress without actually dealing with stress, or to fill some type of void. The hunger we feel when we emotionally eat doesn't arise from actual hunger. And as such, typically, no matter how much we eat, the hunger feeling we have isn't satisfied. Compounding this issue is that we often feel ashamed or embarrassed after this episode. So here's a little chart that shows the difference between physical hunger and emotional hunger. So physical hunger develops slowly over time. You can think of it as the hours leading up to dinner time, for example. Emotional hunger comes about suddenly or abruptly. You might be doing something, you might find you get frustrated with something, and then all of a sudden you have to eat. When you are physically hungry, you desire a variety of food groups. Similar to when you eat dinner, you want different food groups. Emotional hunger, you tend to crave only certain foods, like you only want a certain group of foods when you're hungry, or it's one specific food that you're fixated on. With physical hunger, you feel the sensation of fullness and take it as a cue to stop eating. So when you're eating a meal, as fullness approaches, you feel satisfied. With emotional hunger, you may binge on a food and not feel a sensation of fullness. And that's because the hunger you're trying to satisfy isn't physical. With physical hunger, you don't have negative feelings about eating if you have a good relationship with food. But with emotional hunger, you tend to feel guilt or shame about eating. That said, I think it's important to understand what emotional eating isn't. Food is more than fuel for the body. It is cultural, religious, and social. Eating socially isn't inherently emotional eating. Oftentimes, when we're at a party or a gathering that includes food, being hungry isn't necessarily a prerequisite for eating. While we can still listen to our body when it tells us it's hungry and full, satisfying hunger isn't usually the primary reason for eating in social situations. Similarly, eating to celebrate, such as having drinks or sharing a celebratory dessert, isn't harmful or emotional eating. While we often try to discourage people from using food as a reward or a bribe, the act of eating to celebrate in itself doesn't create that negative relationship with food we hope to avoid. Every now and then we do want a treat or a food that we've been thinking about, which is absolutely normal, and there's no need to feel bad about it. It can be problematic when it controls our thinking and feels like an obsession, but having a food we enjoy because we want it and have been thinking about it isn't inherently emotional eating. A lot of guilt can come from not understanding these differences. How many times have you or someone you've known eaten cake or something at a party or had a treat and afterwards said, "I'm so bad, I ate whatever food," or felt guilt or shame for eating more or differently than you usually do? When we inherently categorize eating for any reason other than to fuel our body as emotional eating in the negative sense, we can cause ourselves a lot of unnecessary stress. There are a few things we can do on the food side of things when we identify hunger as emotional versus actual physical hunger, since we do want to try to listen to our bodies when we feel physical hunger. First, you could keep a food diary, and I don't mean like counting your calories, but when you have an episode of using food to self-soothe, you can write what you think triggered it, how you felt, what you ate, and your thoughts while eating. This is helpful for identifying your triggers and just creating more awareness around the behavior in general. You can also keep more nutritious foods in the house. So this doesn't mean to throw out or to rid your house of foods you enjoy or struggle with. Restriction often leads to overeating of the desired foods, but having more nutritious food around increases your chances of choosing healthier, more filling options when you use food to cope or self-soothe. Another idea is to have smaller portions of the foods you tend to go for when you use food to cope with stress. So if your go-to foods come in bags or containers, you could buy a smaller size or otherwise just buy less. The issue with this, however, isn't really about food, it's about emotions. Some of the work you can do includes identifying triggers, as I previously discussed. So triggers are events or situations that cause an episode of stress or emotional eating, and they can be easy to miss. Another option is to distract yourself. So if you're able to anticipate an episode of stress eating, be ready with a new activity to distract yourself instead, since that's what you're essentially doing when you're eating. Finally, some people find meditation and self-affirmations to be helpful in dealing with emotions, stress, and difficulty. However, ultimately, emotional eating is more about emotions than it is about food. The eating is just how we deal with our feelings, but the feelings are what we need to work on. So in this case, a therapist, especially one who is familiar with stress eating or using food as a coping mechanism, should be able to provide more help than just focusing on the food on your own. I also want to mention that the Alliance for Eating Disorder Awareness is a partner and offer free support groups as well as counseling for eating disorders for those living with someone with eating disorders as well. So now I'd like to flip the script and talk about how foods can make us feel. This might be a little different from what you're used to seeing. Again, I want to be very careful when talking about using food to help certain feelings because, again, food isn't really medicine. Dietitians use medical nutrition therapy, which is an evidence-based approach to help treat or prevent disease through adjustments through a person's diet, but it's not used the same way that pills or medicine is. So let's go over a few foods that may contribute to anxiety. Caffeine is probably the best known as it is the most widely consumed drug in the world. Caffeine is useful in that it can help us feel awake and alert. However, one of the ways it does that is by triggering the release of adrenaline, which can make us feel nervous, anxious, and restless. While it's recommended we stay under 400 milligrams of caffeine a day, that's about 4 cups. Sensitivity varies from person to person. So if you're finding that you're feeling nervous and anxious when you drink coffee or other caffeinated beverages, you might want to cut back a little bit. Sugar is not necessarily an anxiety-causing food, though it can be linked to anxiety in various ways via the sugar rush we get when eating a large amount of refined sugar or refined carbohydrates, and tied to what we talked about before, the anxiety related to that drop in blood glucose. Finally, anxiety may result from certain deficiencies. For example, it's been found that a magnesium deficiency may induce anxiety. Foods high in magnesium include beans, nuts, spinach, seeds, and whole grains, to name a few. If you suspect that you may have some type of nutrient deficiency, talk to your doctor to determine if you require supplements. So you may be aware that several foods can affect sleep. The most famous, again, is probably caffeine. Caffeine is a stimulant and can make it difficult to fall asleep. It can disrupt your sleep, and it can make it difficult to get quality sleep in order to feel well rested. Studies suggest avoiding caffeine in the 6 hours leading up to your bedtime. Spicy foods, especially close to bedtime, can lead to indigestion, which is uncomfortable, and it can be worse when lying down since the acid can more easily travel from your stomach to your esophagus. It has also been found that spicy foods can disrupt sleep. Like spicy foods, a big meal before sleep can cause indigestion and heartburn. Laying down with a stomach full of food can cause acid reflux. You get all that pressure in your stomach from all the food. At the end of the day, our bodies want to rest. So when you eat close to bedtime, even within a couple hours, it requires your body to do hard work, when in reality, it should be winding down for the night. By eating at least 3 hours before bed, we can allow our bodies to properly digest food and wind down for the night. If you find that you're hungry before bed, you can try having a small snack of protein and carbohydrate foods, and that should be better than eating a large meal. Finally, it may seem counterintuitive, but alcohol is not so great for sleep. While it may make us initially drowsy, alcohol impacts our sleep cycle later on, depriving us of the deep sleep we need in order to get proper rest. Sleep apnea is a condition where one momentarily stops breathing while sleeping, often characterized by heavy snoring. Alcohol can worsen sleep apnea, and alcohol consumption may cause severe snoring even in those who do not have sleep apnea. Comfort foods are foods that contain a combination of carbohydrate and protein. So think fried chicken and waffles, macaroni and cheese, mashed potatoes. They all have carbohydrates in the form of waffles, pasta, and potatoes, as well as fat in the form of fried chicken, cheese, and heavy cream and butter. Fat and sugar, and to a lesser extent salt, light up the reward centers of our brain. This isn't necessarily a bad thing. All foods and activities that give us pleasure activate this part of our brain. And evolutionarily, this makes sense. A long time ago, our ancestors were basically at the mercy of nature, so it was advantageous of them to eat foods that helps them gain weight in the event of food scarcity. Now, that's not so much of a problem, but high-calorie foods still make us feel reward and gratification. It's also believed that the combination of carbohydrate and protein together have a synergistic effect. That is, by adding them together, it increases the power of both of them. And in this case, that means the effects they have on our feeling of pleasure and reward. And finally, as discussed before, these types of foods are often served at get-togethers with family and friends and may have the added effect of evoking fond memories and filling a person with nostalgia. Some foods are known for supporting brain health. Walnuts contain alpha-linolenic acid, which is the plant form of the omega-3 fatty acid, and they are abundant in other important compounds that counteract oxidative stress and inflammation, which are both important factors in the loss of cognitive function. While a diet rich in ALA is helpful, our body isn't super efficient at converting it to omega-3, but it's still good for us. Salmon, however, and other fatty fish, such as sardines and anchovies, are very high in other forms of omega-3 that our body can use more easily. These fats are so important for brain health. They help with the construction of our brain cell membranes, or the outer layers of our brain cells, and they facilitate communication between brain cells. Furthermore, consuming adequate omega-3 may help protect against cognitive decline and memory loss. Fruits and other vegetables are also great for brain health. Fruits and vegetables all contain different vitamins and minerals. However, leafy greens contain vitamin K, folate, and other vitamins and minerals that may help slow cognitive decline. Berries contain antioxidants that, like omega-3, can counteract inflammation and other stressors to our brain tissues and help protect memory. They also contain flavonoids, which are compounds that protect brain cell communication. And finally, whole grain products like whole grain bread or oats or brown rice can benefit our brain health. You may have heard the term gut feeling. Turns out there is a strong connection between our brain and our gut. Whole grains feed the microorganisms living inside of our intestines and keeps our guts healthy, which supports neurotransmission, or the signaling between our nerves. Additionally, a buildup of fat and cholesterol in our arteries is associated with cognitive decline, and soluble fiber, the kind found in like oats and barley, helps lower our LDL, or bad cholesterol, and promotes a healthy cardiovascular system. So when we eat meals, that can also affect how we feel. When and how much and how many times a day we eat is highly personal and depends on your routine and how you feel. But these are some general suggestions that may help if you are feeling low energy or struggle with blood sugar crashes. One suggestion is to try to eat within the first few hours of waking up. It can be difficult to eat as soon as you wake up, but eating sometime in the morning, even a small amount, can boost energy levels, focus, and mood. After an entire night without energy, it helps to give our bodies some fuel to get the day started. It also helps to not skip meals. This is related to the earlier slides showing what happens when your blood glucose drops. Skipping meals also deprives your brain of the fuel it needs to focus. Sometimes in life, we become disconnected with the hunger signals our bodies send us. Sometimes due to our schedules or work, we ignore them, and over time we can become disconnected with what our bodies are trying to tell us. So paying attention to how we feel before and after we eat, as well as thinking about the signs of physical versus emotional hunger, can help us reconnect with understanding when we need to eat and can help us better fuel ourselves for the day. It also helps to be consistent. There are a lot of different eating styles out there, and there's no one size fits all, but it's often suggested that eating at regular intervals throughout the day can help maintain stability. And last, as discussed before, it's suggested we avoid eating before bed because it can deprive us of rest. One of the reasons I didn't mention specific foods to help alleviate anxiety or restlessness and whatnot is that for healthy individuals, food can provide us with everything we need in order to alleviate those issues. We just have to eat it in a way that helps us get everything. For the most part, for healthy individuals, eating a balanced, adequate, moderate, and varied diet can help us get closer to getting what we need from food in order to feel our best. A balanced diet is one that has the recommended proportions of protein and fat and carbohydrates, which helps us get all the nutrients we need. We no longer use the food pyramid, but USDA's MyPlate shows an example of a balanced diet. An adequate diet refers to one that gets us enough of what we need. Most simply, this can be achieved by eating enough food. When we don't eat enough food, we risk missing out on important vitamins and minerals. Just as we can be deficient in certain nutrients, we can also have too many. A moderate diet is one that gives us enough nutrients, but not too much. Too much vitamin A, for example, can have serious consequences. And finally, a good diet should be varied. If we eat the same foods over and over, we miss out on the benefits of other foods. While each food usually contains multiple nutrients, we need a mix of different foods to make sure we're getting some of each. For healthy individuals, it's generally recommended trying to get our vitamins and minerals through food before turning to supplementation. A vitamin pill or gummy does not contain like the fiber and water and other unique nutrients that food does. Of course, supplements may be needed in certain situations, and it's always advisable that you speak to your doctor or registered dietitian before adding supplements to your diet. In order to ensure we get everything we need, it's also recommended to avoid fad diets. Fad diets generally either severely cut calories or eliminate food groups. When we cut calories, we risk not getting the nutrients we need in order to feel good. We're just not getting enough food, so we're not getting enough nutrients. When we cut out food groups, we eliminate an entire source of important nutrients. Finally, talk to your doctor. These recommendations are for healthy individuals and may not be suitable for people with certain health conditions. So if you think you might be missing certain nutrients or worried about not getting enough, talk to your doctor or registered dietitian. So Nicole Boone is a registered dietitian and health coach for those who have the district insurance and is a great source of information and assistance. And their scale is also available to those with the district insurance and may be able to answer questions related to your health. So that's all I've got. So thank you so much for joining me this afternoon, and I'll be happy to try to answer whatever questions you may have. What am I doing?
You can stop sharing your screen.
I will.
There we go. Got a little lost there. Thank you.